We're gonna discuss sourdoughs, fermented starters, and their benefits here today. So there are many local products or companies that put out local products that are good for gut health. We ended up choosing sourdough because we were able to line in and meet with Fletch at On the Rise Bread Co. So our gut health, highlighting the local businesses, is catered or yeah, it's chosen and directed towards the sourdough. We will go over some videos with him. There's a couple articles and other references that will be mentioned throughout here. So to get an introduction on bread, we're going to look into Harold McGee's On Food and Cooking. Bread began unlocking the hidden potential for humans being able to transform their natural world to shape human desires. From gruel to bread, for example. It's the same ingredients, bread and water, different processes and times yield distinctly different dishes. Bread is used in religious and secular rituals. We got wedding cakes, Passover matzah, communion bread. Um, the history with social relations. The word Lord comes from Anglo-Saxon Hlaford, which is loafward, meaning the master who supplies food. Lady comes from Hlafdige. It's Hlaefdige, which means loaf kneader, the person whose retinue produces what her husband distributes. And then we also have companion and company from late Latin compagno, or one who shares bread. The profession of a baker became a specialized profession in 300 BCE in Egypt. The Industrial Revolution shifted from bread making at home to a centralized industrial factories, made manufacturing systems dominating over biological dough development. A quote from page 520: industrial breads bear little resemblance to traditional breads. We have the basic structure elements of bread, which is water, gluten proteins, and starch granules. There's mention of dough versus batter. Dough has more flour than water, where batter has more water than flour. Here we have a machine that flattens the dough, compresses all the air out, and then it portions and divides it and cuts it up. Here we have the mixing station. We'll see more in the video, and then you have the control panels. We're gonna start doing a artisan starter. We got Fletch here on the rise.
Great. This is like one of the first steps in feeding a sourdough starter. We inoculate it every 24 hours. We feed it 24 hours, and it's just a really simple process of adding more water and more flour to the sourdough starter that's already here. And the temperature of the ingredients really matters. So the mother starter here that we've got is held at around 37 to 39 degrees. The water that's going in here is going to mix until it's dosing at the proper temperature, which is around 72 degrees. And then the flour that we're going to use is kept in this room, and this room is temperature controlled at around 72 degrees. So I know the ingredients temperature across the board, and we definitely want. So I've got the mother starter in here, I've got the water dosing, and then I'm going to add flour. So what we're going to do is just mix the three ingredients here. And these mixers are kind of cool. They can do manual or cycle forward and reverse. Manual. You can see the screw in the mixer is sort of starting to incorporate the ingredients.
So here we're going to look at a consumer report. So the increased acetic and lactic acids in the sourdough bread is the reason why we have a lower glycemic index, because it decreases the digestion in the digestion tract. These acids kind of interfere and slow the uptake of the carbohydrates. Whereas the phytic acid, which is an anti-nutrient that binds with iron, calcium, and zinc, rendering them indigestible, These are degraded from the sourdough microbes. So it's a multiple effect in opposite directions, kind of, with increasing absorption and also decreasing absorption. And then the fermented dough has probiotics, but these probiotics are killed off during baking due to the heat. And then the nutrient profile of the flour depends on the grain that's used, whether it's wheat, rye, oats, barley, etc., and also the type of flour, whether it's white refined or with the whole grain with all three parts.
It's trying to compete with General Mills. Oh my god. So forward is a way to incorporate the ingredients and also to start developing gluten. But I'm more interested right now in just incorporating the ingredients. And so I'm going to run it on reverse, which doesn't really act to develop the gluten, and it has more of a process where it's like kind of breaking things up and breaking it all together. And that's what we're going for right now. You can see the textures kind of coming together. So like this is like doughy right here, but there's still like a lot of dry flour that's unincorporated. And so we're going to want to incorporate all that in there. This is fairly stiff as far as doughs go. This is like in the low 60s in terms of hydration. And it's going to come out of here like pretty set up. You can also see that the dough actually starts climbing this breaker bar right in the center. It'll get to the point where it'll ride all the way up here.
Here we have another article. So raw cereals that are milled naturally have certain microorganisms on them. The microbial profile depends on the farming conditions and the degree of milling. There's a wealth of benefits to sourdough. For instance, taste. You got the complexity of the taste, the flavor, the texture, the aroma is improved. It also improves the digestibility. You got improved tolerance with IBS and disrupted network of gluten proteins. Neutralizing phytic acid improves nutrient and mineral absorption. And then in this article, opposed to the other article, the prebiotics remain; those don't get killed off like with the probiotics. And we have a lower glycemic index. And here from the same article, we have a figure and a table. Please pause to review.
The temperature of the finished dough sort of matters. And so you can see like right now, it's just under 72 degrees in here, which is great. That's what it's set at. I confirmation in my other, we always have like thermometers throughout the building. But if I stick it in here, it's probably going to be a little bit higher. Yeah, so you can see it's rising. Not too much though. This is real close to where we want it. This is like ideal. And it's because we had control of the temperature of all the things that went into it.
To begin with.
Yep. As you mix dough like this, if you mix it really intensively, it will add kinetic energy to the dough and it will rise in temperature. And there is an industry, there's a curve essentially that you can figure out how much energy you're going to add to a mix given the amount of time that you're doing it. Okay. So you can look this stuff up, there are charts and all that sort of thing. Yeah. And it's useful to work backwards, like it's called a desired dough temperature. And so you can add the kinetic energy to the other factors, the water temperature, the ingredients temperature, and all that sort of thing, and get yourself to a desired dough temperature. We don't do that every day because we standardize the process, and then we have very little variation so that we don't actually have to be constantly. But if you're in an environment where we don't have AC and you can't standardize, I'll be changing the water temperature every single day to adjust for the air temperature, because then I would actually have to do a calculation and be like, 1 times this, and like they're weighted depending on how much. It can be complicated.
Yeah.
So the dough's been mixing for 10 minutes or so, and it's pretty well developed. We don't develop this starter a lot. The gluten development aspect of this is not the important thing of what's going on right now. Mainly, we're looking at bringing the ingredients together and feeding the mother so that environment can get going. All the microbes and bacteria, yeast and everything that's in there can start procreating and growing, because we want it to thoroughly like inoculate the entire mass. And then this is going to go back into the refrigerator, and it's going to spend the night in the retarder at 40 some degrees, and then we'll use it tomorrow. It's going to double in size between now and then, but this is what the starter's at right now.
It's getting about like 11 pounds in each container.
These are, it's actually 4 on the recipe for tomorrow.
Okay.
So each one is exactly whatever it says on the sheet.
Okay. So varied amounts.
So here we have another article. It's a systematic review of over 1,230 articles. The microbial diversity, we have 59 different bacterial genera and 80 different species of yeast that were assessed. Overall, this article found that overall there's a significant improvement of the product with fermented starters as opposed to baker's yeast. Variation of improvements, shelf life, rheology, sensory, and nutritional attributes, the mineral, bioavailability, dietary fibers, glycemic index, protein digestibility, due to many factors including type of flour used, how and when the grain is milled, proportion of ingredients, how long the dough is kneaded, how long it's been sitting, the temperature of the ingredients, as well as the ambient temperature. So there's a lot of factors that go into the bread making process, and with the sourdough, we have a lot of improved benefits as opposed to baker's yeast. From that same article, the systematic review, we have this figure and 2 others following. This one just summarizes the characteristics of respective advantage scores based on descriptive sensory analyses from 48 different research articles comparing sourdough and baker's. Here we have a word cloud representing the nutritional attributes focused in the last 30 years of research influenced by sourdough fermentation. And here for the last figure of the last article, we have a glycemic index comparison between the baker's yeast bread and the sourdough. This is over 22 different research articles in vivo challenges, and we have the median values of 65.1 and 94.2, so it's significantly lower of a glycemic index for the sourdough bread, which can have huge impacts on people with diabetes or irritable bowel syndrome and whatnot. So there's many benefits to sourdough breads. Hopefully we've illustrated that well.
What's the difference between like Levain bread and these other ones? So they're all the same mother?
Yeah.
There's just other ingredients you're going to add later on?
Yep. So
Okay.
that's the honey whole wheat. This is a recipe. It has hard red. It has yeast in it. It's not just sourdough, but there's sourdough. Flax, honey, vegetable oil, and then the Levain, much simpler. It has, of all the breads, we only put the mother directly into the Levain. So the Levain had all this, these, and mother. So it has almost 100 pounds of pre-fermented flour out of 262 pounds total. That's a very high proportion. That's like 40%, right? You only need about 10% to like actively to like make your bread rise as much as you need it to.
Okay.
This is more about flavor, more in terms of like we've had people be like, oh, what bread should I eat if I have intolerance to wheat? And because a lot of people are like see sourdough as some sort of panacea to their gluten intolerance or whatever.
Yeah.
And some people swear by it, but I always point them to this one because it has the highest proportion of pre-fermented flour.
Okay.
So in terms of being a sourdough, it's the most sour.
Okay.
Polish is a yeasted pre-ferment, so it's been fermenting for a longer period of time, but now sourdough is just baker's yeast. And that is, it's a process that was developed in France, and it was developed shortly after baker's yeast had like swept through the country. When baker's yeast became a product that was available to the public, it quickly dominated the industry because it was so easy.
Yeah.
But the quality, especially, this was before preservatives had been developed, the quality really sucked. The bread would last a day before it was fully stale.
Yeah.
And that is a function of both hydration and a function of the keeping properties of sourdough, which are aided by the fermentation process. It's mostly hydration. There's a longer hydration. The dough is around as dough longer before you bake it, and so the flour is able to absorb the water in it more fully.
Yeah.
But some of the byproducts of the fermentation process also help with scaling. They're sort of prevent scaling.
Natural preservative.
Natural preservative. And so people had been enjoying those byproducts for thousands of years with naturally leavened dough. All of a sudden, they made yeasted breads that overnight were like kind of garbagey and not very popular in France. There was like a pushback. And so they developed processes that are like pouliche, where they get some of the benefits of the sourdough process, longer hydration being the biggest one of them, that your dough is fermenting and hydrating for like a day before you use it. And that would bring some of those characteristics that people are missing, flavor and back, while still just using baker's yeast, because the pouliche is just like a pinch. I mean, this is the baker's yeast that we use, and it's an encapsulated dry yeast, instant dry yeast, and you need to use, for a mixer this big, which can do 360 pounds of dough, you use like a tablespoon. So it's not very much to get the process going. Whereas the sourdough, you use a lot of it, you use pounds of it. The baker's yeast is also more economical than. But I mean, this all becomes product. So it's like, it was either going to be flour that was in the final dough, or we're just pre-fermenting it. So it's not like it cost me something extra. And in that sense, I don't have to pay for the sourdough at all. It provides itself. Like, we throw away maybe 3 pounds of flour a day, and that's my cost on the sourdough. So not very much.
And how long have you had that mother for? Because you
The mother,
cut it?
yeah, so the mother predates the bakery. Kate had that mother going, probably early 90s at least, if not the 80s. And it's been continuously fed this whole time. Yeah, so mother's over 30 years. We've been in commercial production for 25 years, but the mother's is going strong. I keep mother in every freezer that I have. The off chance that all the freezers die at the same time.
Yeah.
We can just quickly revive mother.
Nice.
But mostly we're pretty good. We don't screw up too often that it's like not an issue.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so the mother's already been sitting for a day. You've cut some of the mother.
Yep.
Fed it now.
Yep.
This is technically day 2 of the process.
This is technically day 2. Yeah,
Day
right
2.
now.
Okay, because it's already sat over one night.
Yeah.
And then, could
So
you
this-
run through the process of what you'll do with these tomorrow?
Yeah, so all of this bread, or this dough that's now starter, is going to go into a retarder. It's like 42 degrees in there. It is actively fermenting at that temperature. So the cutoff temperature is around 40 degrees. So above 40, and you're seeing this metabolized still. Below that, and the most of the culture will become like dormant, kind of like they're less active, they're less likely to procreate and all that sort of thing. So there's a temperature component to that, and so we want this to continue fermenting. We want it to ferment slowly, because if you bring that temperature up to like 70 degrees, and then the metabolism changes again, and you're seeing the byproducts are different, like in terms of how much lactic acid it's producing versus like other byproducts of the fermentation. So we are going for low and slow, and generally I think you get a slightly nuttier flavor. It's not quite so in your face sour. I think that comes from slightly warmer or you can go really long. You can ferment for days if you want to, and you can get a different sort of flavor profile as well. And I imagine different nutritional benefits one way or the other. But yeah, this stuff is going to go into the fridge overnight, and then tomorrow morning we're going to bring it back out, and we'll go through this list and just bang them out one at a time. Whenever it calls for starter, so in this case, we have 78 pounds of starter that's going to the Levant, plus 20 pounds of mother. Those will go right into the mixer with all the other ingredients, and it's like we're feeding it again almost. But those are with the final ingredients, and the dough that comes out at that point is the final dough. And then shortly after we mix it, we'll divide it in pieces, we'll shape it into the finished loaves, and then those finished loaves will go back in for another night. So the process is 4 days all in all. And then it'll be baked on the fourth day essentially. And we're constantly doing that 6 days a week. So I have, at any given time, I'm feeding the mother, and then day 2, I'm making the starter, and day 3, I'm making all the doughs, and day 4, I'm baking it. We're doing all of that every single day.
Here we have some of the portion dough that we saw making, and then we have the ovens that they use. There's 2 different ovens, and then here's all the bread racks with all the loaves. And then these will be sitting in the retarder for another day, and then gets baked off, cooled, packaged. Lastly, we have other gut-friendly products local to Montana. We weren't able to highlight all of these as we went over our time already, but look into it and improve your gut health. Here we have our references, and we want to thank Fletch and On the Rise for housing us and showing us the process, taking us in, and hopefully you found this educational, entertaining, and informative. Thank you.